Hello, Daniel. Thank you for being here. How are you today?
Hey, not too bad, cheers. Not too bad. Busy day, but towards the end of it on our end. So doing well for a Tuesday anyway.
Well, over here I'm starting my day, so it's nice to have you here and to have the opportunity to discuss the new Dune record, which is due to be released on April 19th, right?
Yep, yeah. So next Friday, I believe. So very close now.
Yeah, it's been 4 years since Etemen Ainka. Or
Yeah, well, three
3 years.
years,
Yeah,
3 years. So
3 years.
that one, Edelman came out March 2021. So just a month over, exactly a month to over the day of Edelman, basically,
Well,
for 3 years.
okay. Just as a nice record question, I have a random one. I'm trying here. Do you believe in ghosts, or have you ever experienced something similar that you would consider a paranormal experience?
Uh, so I don't really believe in ghosts myself. I did once have a thing when I was a kid, and I believed in ghosts for about a good 6 months or so when a load of books just randomly fell off my shelf in the middle of the night. And I think I was currently reading like Bram Stoker's Dracula or something, which had me in that mindset.
Yeah.
But I tend to be much more on the scientific sort of side of things. I think as much as like it'd be awesome to come back, haunt some people. I think we'd probably see a lot more ghosts around if they were and everyone was coming back.
So you don't believe in the spooky thing happening, but you wouldn't rule out the existence of maybe a parallel dimension that we can see with our own eyes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you've got sort of like the ideas of parallel universes, ideas of time not being linear, things like this, which I think you can never really write anything out. There's always so much we're sort of discovering as we go and things are pieced together. But the sort of multi-worlds theory and everything definitely. So perhaps some of the spooky goings on. This is why it's going on.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into the new album, I always ask my interviewers, my interviewees, um, maybe some background about their story with music. So in this case, how do you remember being introduced to music as a whole, and then acquire a taste for heavy or extreme music?
Yeah. So I mean, I've probably got into music through like a lot of people through their parents initially. So my dad had a big. I remember growing up and he had a big vinyl collection. A lot of sort of 60s, 70s rock and prog. I very much grew up sort of going on family holidays in the car, listening to a lot of Pink Floyd and Peter Gabriel when I was
Mm,
sort of 5, 6 years old. Is probably my earliest memories of that. And then myself, I think I ended up for like starting playing. I think from a very young age, I played the violin for a couple of years. That was like my first instrument, I think. But then I sort of became a bit of an angry teenager, as
okay.
as we all can do.
Yeah.
And then the first proper sort of guitar or heavier sort of band of my own I sort of started getting into was The Offspring
Okay.
with their Smash album. My brother actually sent me a message earlier on today saying, "How old do you feel?" Smash is now 30 years old.
Wow.
So, so that was the first time I think I remember sort of going out and sort of the sort of thing of like finding a band by yourself for the first time, and that first time you probably start digging into a band's back catalogue and you know all the lyrics off by heart and everything like that. So I think Offspring was the first sort of band like that for me, and then sort of throughout my teens, that then progressed into a lot of new metal, which
Mm.
got me into the heavier side of stuff. I was definitely a new metal kid, so Korn, Slipknot, 1 Minute Silence we had over here, Earth Tone. I think one of the first gigs I ever went to when I was about 16 was Earth Tone 1 Minute Silence, which was this way. Uh, um, and yeah, and then sort of just progressed from there. Tastes got heavier over a while. I think I picked up the guitar rather than the violin about the age of 15. Just probably just seemed a lot cooler at the time. But and then throughout sort of high school, I was then in various metal bands, and that was sort of how I was starting cutting my teeth with learning to play a bit of heavier stuff, thrashier stuff.
It's interesting that you mentioned that first it was like a violin, an instrument that you starting to play, and then you immerse yourself into more punk rock heavy music. Because well, the thing I imagine with violin is that you kind of get more sensible or sensitive about music, you know. So I'm curious about when you have this background, this musical background, what interested you about heavy music as a whole, like what qualities of it?
Yeah, I mean, probably the aggression. First, I think
Okay.
when you're that sort of age, like going on 14, 15, 16, and you're like running half hormones all the time. Especially sort of like, as I said, mentioned Offspring again, like they had a few songs on that album, swear words and like fast guitar, and
Mm,
it was just stuff that was, although like I'd grown up listening to sort of rock music, it
mm,
was just something that was a bit different to what my parents were listening to, what some of the other people at school were listening to, what you were seeing sort of on TV. And I think that sort of difference and again the sort of aggression of it was certainly what drew me to it in the first place. Being the sort of like rebellious teenager I was.
as you're talking about sorry, the Offspring, there's this band name in my head. I will write it in the chat. Kirky is a rock from band from Greece, and
I
they're
don't know, Kirky.
they're about to release a new album in this coming Friday, and it's the band is very very fast rock, but somehow it reminds me about the Offspring. Like it could be a mix,
Nice.
a mix with Mastodon and the Offspring. If that makes sense to you, I would hardly suggest you to listen to when you have the chance if you don't are not familiar with the band.
Fantastic. No, I'll check that out. I'll add that to my notes for Friday's listening list whilst I'm at work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you did have some bands prior to Dune, right? What kind of sounds were you trying before?
Yeah, so I mean, throughout high school, I had sort of three, four bands up until sort of early 20s. So that varied from sort of I think the first ever band I was in was pretty straight up metal. I mean, we started off doing some Slayer covers,
Mm,
things like that, and then our sound was very much that um, sort of thrash, a bit of death metal creeping in. And then after that, sort of my taste just got heavier and heavier up until my early 20s. So I had a sort of death metal band, a grindcore band that I played in whilst I was in university for a couple of years. And then so I think that was up till
what type of bands?
probably was about 24, 25. What type, sorry? So death metal one, I had a band called Spasticated Razor Masturbator, which
What?
which when you're young, you pick some silly things.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was very much sort of very short, sort of death metal-y sort of stuff. And then, as I say, after that, I was in a grindcore band called Joe Pesci, which again just got even shorter songs and even faster.
Mm.
So that they were about played for about 2 years, sort of thing. Did a couple of festivals in Europe and things with them. That was the first time we did any proper sort of like touring outside the UK with anything.
So musically, and even with the taste for music, you reach to a point or with heavier and brutal stuff, but then you kind of came back to a different type of music with post metal and doom. How did that happen?
They just getting older. Like the sort of early bands, obviously, as mentioned before, sort of like running on aggression and things like that. And as I just got older, I mean, it's when I was a sort of teenager, I basically only listened to metal for quite
Mm,
a few years. And then sort of as I got into the sort of late 20s, things like that, a lot of other music started creeping in, as well as some other sort of post-metal things like that. I mean, I'd always sort of been aware of bands like sort of Neurosis,
Mm,
Early Mastodon were kicking about at that time. Obviously, they were a lot sort of heavier when they were first starting out than what they are now. But I think as I say, as I sort of got older, tastes widened. Wasn't such an angry young man anymore. So as I say, that just sort of widened out. Before June, I think I was playing in a sort of stoner metal band as well, which was sort of local to the area, which is how I met all the initial guys in June. And yeah, I mean, as I say, I think, as I'm sure you appreciate, as I say, you just sort of your tastes do tend to widen a bit. I think if you don't move on from the initial angry metal stage by at least sort of 30s, you're probably missing out on a lot of good music. So
definitely. Well, I mean, you experience like you harness the power of the more traditional metal like Slayer and then death metal. So, um, as from a musician point of view, what is the I mean, what I'm trying to say is post metal is not it could be perceived as less heavy, but it's at the same time like more cerebral and more uh it's, it offers the opportunity to reach to higher arcs of music through less riffy passages, but more about the momentum of the spectacle, right? Um, is this sort of thing like did you or the band saw an opportunity to approach these kind of things musically?
yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, there's obviously the sort of very early album release Progenitor that was sort of written quite quickly, and that I'd say was before we'd sort of probably found our feet, and I wouldn't really just we'd probably be more of a sort of stoner rock sort of band, stoner
Right.
metal at that point. And then as we sort of started playing together for a couple of years and the sound sort of developed, we very quickly realized we wanted to play the sort of longer, not necessarily more complex guitar wise, but certainly sort of a bit more advanced for what we were doing sort of compositionally.
Mm,
And I think that's where the sort of post metal thing comes into it a bit. Because I'd say like post metal is a bit of a weird one, as you say, because it's some post metal is heavier than what you would deem as regular metal. Some probably isn't. So it's obviously a bit of a like odd genre to nail down just on that front sort of thing. But I think certainly that sort of overarching more sort of composition where you getting away from the sort of standard verse chorus
right.
bridge end sort of structure to stuff, as well as sort of bringing in that, as you say. So obviously we love throwing a good metal riff in there, but also having space for sort of more open passages and especially sort of more atmospheric or more soundscapey type stuff is
Mm.
something I think we've certainly sort of developed as we've gone on as a band, and in our own personal taste as well.
Personally, I discovered the band with Asheran a few years ago, and since then we and our blog, our friends from the blog have been hooked with the band each
Yeah,
time you
fantastic.
guys release
Cheers.
an album. And the things that you're describing here are very much what I like about well post metal in general, but in specifically about Dune. You know, it's not just post metal. We can talk about sludge, stoner, psychedelic type of passages, and maybe well, I think that what the band has been doing these past few years is like developing or evolving in that regard. Will you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think so. Sharon, I'd say, was the first point where we'd sort of started finding, I guess, what you could deem like our sound. But we've always pulled in a lot of influences from different, both heavy genres and non-heavy genres. Uh, and that's sort of, as I say, developed as each album's gone along. And even with this new one, there's newer elements on there that I think people won't have found on sort of either a Sharon or Etterman. But I think with each album, we've definitely sort of looked to how we can sort of at the same time as I say, sort of keeping that sound so that people are like, that sounds like June, you know what I mean? There's also been new bits, new influences, Maybe it helps keep things fresh for us. It's hopefully it's interesting for the listener as well.
I guess the main thing that I like about listening to Dune is that it always has seems to have like an experimental approach, even though it doesn't necessarily make you focus that much about okay, this band is experimental. You know, you kind of integrate the whole thing into a seemingly whole, and that is what I'm drawn about this band. And something interesting happened, or well, in my experience or in my perspective of music, you know, the bands do their own thing each time, you know, develop an idea or a concept, but it seems to be like um, collective thing happening, and maybe unconsciously with musicians or bands that, for example, a few years back when I discovered Asheran, I feel like I was ready for something like that, or I was waiting for something like that, because in recent years we have seen like the approach to post metal or heavy music as a whole has been expanding. You know, like adding a more lighted type of music. You know, just more colorful. And we have here in our blog have been saying that Dune has been like an example of how the future of post metal might be, you know, like I mean,
Cheers, cheers.
you know,
Big praise, cheers.
we have like examples of cult of Luna, you know, like developing their own thing, and nowadays being just fucking monumental. Then we have like the ocean type of post metal music, you know, that has grown into more synthesized type of music. But I think Dune stands in a good middle, in a good center place. Cultus Luna on the left, maybe the ocean on the right. I don't know if you or the band noticed that the these days the offers that are around us are like is more suitable for a band like Dune for your sound.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously these days, as well, it's a lot easier to sort of get your hands on a lot wider range of music than say like when I was first starting in bands, when you had to physically go down a CD shop, and
Right,
what you may
right.
or may not be getting is a might be good, might be bad, might be something you've never heard before, which was also kind of the excitement. But I mean, yeah, I mean bands like Cult of Luna, The Ocean, um, are big sort of influences on us. I've listened to Cult of Luna in their various forms since I was sort of 17, 18. So cheers, yeah, I'd say like that's big praise to be told. So we're sort of sitting in between them. If we're regarded anywhere near those two bands by you guys, that's awesome. But yeah, I mean, I think trying to find a place is an interesting one. It's one where, I mean, as I said before, we sort of always certainly want to approach each album a little bit different. We're always sort of, whilst we might take influences from things that are going on around us, especially in the metal scene. I mean, it's hard not to when you're out touring or seeing bands. The amount of bands we sort of cross with on tour and everything like that, it's hard not to take some sort of influence from that, obviously. But at the same time, I think a little bit aware of, well, how can we do this a little bit different? What can we do to set this apart a little bit? And hopefully we are finding our own place.
I think you guys definitely are. I want to ask you, well, it seems to be that this album is less focused on synths that the previous record until by the end. So is this by design a choice, something intentional to be less focused on that kind of textures?
So I'm not sure it's that we were less focused on the synth with this one. I think it's more that some of the songs and the way the album orders ended out as well, because the way we sort of write is a lot of the time the guitars and the drums are written first,
Mm.
and then they'll be finalized usually before the synth is written. So we have on this album, for example, we've had Max, who's been playing synth live for us for a couple of years. Previously on Ettermen, Victor had written all the synths going into that recording. which again was written after everything else. But this one with Voidkind, we've had both Max and Victor write the synths. But again, they were sort of, all there's obviously been ideas whilst we've sort of been writing of what might be on there. Again, a lot of the tracks are written guitar first, guitar and drums first, basically,
okay.
as the foundation. And then the synth goes on after. And so what I think is slightly different with this album is it probably slightly more, there's a few more sort of slightly straight up guitar driven tracks, I'd say, on this.
Yeah.
Than there were on Etamen, which was a bit more, everything was 9-10 minutes grandiose because that was the
Yeah.
sort of theme of the album. Whereas this album's a bit different to that in that, as I say, a lot of the tracks are a bit punchier. So whereas there is sort of synth on everything, there's certainly, as I say, it's only towards the sort of end of the album you get those big breakout sort of synth moments. And I think it wasn't so much a sort of, again, a conscious sort of decision to do that and change that up, or that was going to end up how the end of the album was going to be. Because sort of none of the order was really decided until we got a lot of it recorded and things like that. But it's just sort of happened that that's felt like the best sort of way for the running order to work with the context
Mm.
of the tracks and how they built sort of throughout the album to almost have it sort of build to the sort of the last 2-3 tracks having a bigger sort of crescendo, and those being at the end of the album, perhaps more than throughout.
Well, this record resonates with me strongly as an Acheran fan rather than a Temenanka fan, you know. But up until the end, the last three songs are like, okay, now this is the evolution from the last record, synthesized way, you know, like I can see why you choose to put that songs to the final moments. Like it feels more grandiose in the scheme of the album. Um, I want to ask you, when you write a record that, yes, you had to be, you are conscious about having an experimental approach, developing a sound, and also, as you mentioned, it's kind of the guitars are the foundation. How do you intersect that with having like big concepts, like, you know, trying to tell a story? I mean, what I'm trying to say is, how do you, how is the process developed? You know, is simultaneously like, okay, we have this type of ideas that we want to like explore musically. How do you intertwine that?
Yeah, so I mean, what usually happens, the way the last couple of albums have sort of worked with that, is that as we're sort of working on the guitars, or as the guys are working on the guitars with this one, there's always a few chats going on in the background about sort of what concept or what sort of themes or what narrative sort of ideas we can sort of use for the album, and that'll sort of get sort of fleshed out over a few discussions and bits and pieces as and when songs are sort of starting to come together, and we've
Okay.
got ideas of what sort of songs are starting to do. So we'll sort of have an idea of, okay, is this, for example, like, is this going to be quite a light album? Are we using lots more acoustics? Or is this a heavier album that's got a load of massive sludgy riffs? Okay, cool. That's probably going to have an effect on what the narrative is about, because that has
Right.
to fit somehow into fitting thematically with the music itself. Like the lyrics for it, if a section's very heavy, the lyrics are probably going to be darker at that bit, or about some horrible goings on, or some giant space beast. Um, Whereas obviously there's other parts that are a lot more sort of epic or open. There'll probably be sort of the more poetry style sort of bits coming into it. But yeah, as I say, so the concept sort of gets fleshed out, and then what's happened with sort of last couple is then I usually do a sort of initial rough rundown of various lyrics, song
Mm.
ideas, and then we'll kind of sit down, and from those lyrics, we'll start sort of having a discussion of, okay, well, maybe this set of lyrics fits to this song. Because the way we do a lot of the concepts is like it's written as an overarching concept. There'll be different points of a story throughout that. But the way I write a lot of the time, lyrics-wise, as well, is that songs don't, it doesn't necessarily have to run in that order for it to all make sense, which certainly helps, I think, when you then end up obviously getting to the recording stage and having that, maybe we'll put this track before this or this before this. So although there's always this sort of overarching story in mind, the sort of lyrics can be moved around with it still sort of making sense, kind of.
So you identify the type of mood of the music to try to find a narrative that fits the whole thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or we'll be sort of go, right, well, I've got these 3 pages of lyrics written for this bit. Right, what fits best on this?
So
and also the sort of idea of what sort of type vocals are going on there as well. Because obviously we've got sort of, there's now 3 different, there's myself. I tend to lean towards doing heavier sort of shouted vocals on the album. Victor's got a big mix of both cleans and heavies. But again, like our 2 voices are sort of, my heavy voice is different to his. So we'll always have a bit of an idea of sort of who's maybe going to be where, and that can sort of influence some of the lyric writing.
I read some of the in the press release that this album is like intentionally more, I want to say, practical, in the sense that you want to take this to a live experience show. And I also read that you practice a lot, like you put a lot of weight into rehearsals for the product of the music. So it's safe to say that the energy of you guys together is what mainly nurtures the result of each new album, but like having in mind that or take into account that you want to be more practical to make music that is well possible to take to a live audience, right? So for now, as of now, you are a more experienced band, having played lots of shows and produced a few records, more records. What I'm trying to ask is, in what ways, taking into account what I already say, in what way the kind of energy or the connection that you feel with your audience in a live setting inform or maybe like guide what you want to achieve musically?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we always sort of keep the live stuff in mind, because obviously that for us is one of the sort of key. I mean, obviously, like getting the album out there is great, that's fantastic. But for us, I think always the key goal is, right, how do we now get these songs in front of people? How do we start doing these? Because getting the songs down on record isn't necessarily, the way they are sometimes on record, isn't necessarily going to come across as well live. There's definitely, with the last album and even with the sort of preparation we're doing now for the sort of practice for the Voidkind tour that's coming up, we're definitely, there's bits that change, there's certain parts of composition that change. It's obviously, like when you record an album, you have the sort of luxury of being able to go, oh well, this bit we can put four guitar layers on here because it sounds cool. But then once you get to the practicing that live, you then go, oh right, now we've only got 2 guitars now. So which parts are we picking? Which one do you want to do? And the same with some of the synths, that can change a little bit. Even going, oh well, now we need to, like, the live set's going to be this. This isn't necessarily the order that the tracks are in on the album, because we find that the sort of flow of how, say, a live set could work isn't necessarily the same as how sitting at home listening to an album works for you. So I think the live performance is definitely sort of always kept in mind now when we're writing, just in anything, just to make that whole getting from the album to playing the songs live process a little bit just easier. But again, as you say, there's certainly a few songs on this that are sort of punchier in length. They're sort of more straightforward ones for bringing live. I mean, that can affect things from even, say, going, oh, we're on a festival date, we've got a shorter festival slot than if we're playing a headlining show. So, for example, we've run into issues in the past where, say, in the last couple of albums, where all your songs are 10 minutes and you're given a 35-minute or a 45-minute festival set, you suddenly go, we don't have anything that can fit
Right.
into that slot. So I think this album, especially, not just for that reason, obviously the songs have to naturally sort of feel the length that they are. But it's certainly, I think, one thing we wanted to keep in mind for this is to bring a couple of sort of shorter, punchier numbers. If only fit a few more into live sets in the shorter, oddly timed sets.
These are the things that you learn over the process, right? Like, maybe you don't openly discuss these things with the band, but maybe each member is consciously about it, and well,
Yeah, yeah, for
this is
sure.
the result. I want to ask you, have you seen the new Dune movie? I think it's
Yeah. It went a couple of weeks ago, a couple of days after it came out.
how great is it?
It's good. It's good. I like it. There's like lovely visuals, all the stuff on Gady Prime, fantastic. It's a really nice new take on it. Like I grew up on the David Lynch
Right.
one, so a bit less weird than that, a bit more grandiose and everything. But no, fantastic. Certainly recommend go and see it in the cinema for anyone who hasn't yet seen it, because it's a visual treat. Few I thought the ending was a little quick, but I guess there's probably an extended version coming at some point. So
Well, yeah, it feels like there's a big build up in the entire movie, and by the end, like the last 15 or 20 minutes are like summarize the entire thing, right? The entire plot.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I wanted to see more Sardaukar at the end. It was like the Sardaukar turned up and then they were gone off screen, wiped out. It was like no.
right, and the end of the Baron feels like anticlimactic. I don't know if this is how it's approached in the books, but I mean, I like the death. Like there's no drama. Just you are dead now.
Yeah. No, I mean it's slightly different in the books because they changed a couple of things with because in the books, like for example, like Jessica's daughter is born and she has an impact on the end of it, whereas
Mm,
and they're sort of meant to have been in the desert for sort of I think it's been a while since I read it, but I think for like sort of 3-4 years, but obviously for the film they've sort of condensed that down to them only being in the desert for about what feels like sort of 6 months max sort of thing. But no, I mean, as I say, it's still great fun. It's a very difficult book to adapt as well. There's a lot of content, and I don't think anyone's ever going to be 100% happy with any adaptation that ever gets made of it. But I think this has certainly been the best one we've had so far. Even though 16-year-old me might disagree on the Lynch one being better still. Patrick Stewart's just hard to beat.
yes. Well, I mentioned the movie, of course, for the name, the reference on the bad name, but also because I find some resemblance with the story of the movie and the narrative of this album, like following well, in the movie, a messiah type figure, and here we have like a god figure, right, guiding like a religious movement or people, correct?
Yeah. So it's a little different in that it's rather than being a direct figure, the sort of narrative we've got going on is more that people start receiving almost sort of dreams where this figure is appearing to them in
Mm,
those dreams, almost more like a bit of a sort of hive mind sort of feel. Rather than it being a sort of a specific character leading them. There are then, as the album sort of progresses, there's characters that then come into it as that sort of religion sort of finds its feet and forms. There's then sort of leader characters who come in. But the main sort of thing feels sort of at the start is having a sort of very science-based sort of belief system and faith in place, and how that then can be sort of overthrown by new ideas of faith, which the sort of science can't explain. So it's the sort of, well, why are people getting these visions or this? Well, we've got no scientific reason for that. So it's sort of exploration of how those two sort of ideas of a sort of science-based and a faith-based could come to heads and then change, and then throughout we then sort of switch to, once obviously that new faith takes hold, it then that and develops into a whole weird of goings on where they end up finding these sort of new almost beings and interdimensional bits of travel that this opens up to them. But I mean, there's certainly the sort of underlying influence of sort of Frank Herbert sci-fi in there. Same with all our albums. We're all sort of big sci-fi nerds. So there's sort of Alistair Reynolds books, things like this. But there was also and sort of Foundation, things like that. But yeah, I think with the Dune thing, it's always a sort of more of a sort of we love the rather than it being sort of necessarily influenced directly by the story of Dune or the songs being an offshoot of that narrative. We always much more wanted to sort of create our own sci-fi universe and base things in that with our own worlds and ideas and weird goings on.
Yeah, well, now that you mentioned Foundation and the aspect of this being like a multi-generational thing happening in the arc of this album, I see that relation there. Nice t-shirt, by the way. Nice one.
Cheers. Yeah, this is the second version of this t-shirt I own because I lost the first one on tour, so I had to rebuy it when they did a re-release a couple of years back. But it's a favorite one of mine. Absolutely sick band.
I'm guessing that you're waiting for a new candidate album sometime in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, you never really know what Canderia are going to put out these days, but it seems like they're sort of back to the older sound. I mean, I'd love it if they ever rejoined with, is it Ken Schultz, the original drummer? Because that boy is just insane. But yeah, there's certainly, because they obviously went through the van crash and then changed the sound up quite a bit, and then they've sort of come back to that sort of original, sort of more techie Canderia sound that I sort of grew up on. But they were weirdly enough one of the first bands I saw when I was like 16, 17. I think maybe my third or fourth gig was Canderia and Clutch together in Leeds, which was a weird lineup, but an awesome lineup.
I want to take a moment to mention that the press release mentions a Berserk reference or a Berserk inspiration in this album, and well, I was pleasantly surprised to read that. To what extent does the type of story or the type of motifs, and I mean, because this album like heavily relies on the guy's figure type of entity, and well, Berserk has a very like special approach to a god deity, like the causality, the idea of evil, like this belief system, and like the god is a product of hate, and like you mentioned earlier that like this god figure appears in dreams, and we have some things happening, well, some similar things happening in the story of Berserk. Well, before that, I want to ask you, how much do you like Berserk, and what do you like about Berserk?
Berserk's amazing. I first came into Berserk from the again with my mate of mine picked up when I was probably 16 again. Not to go back to my teenage years that much, but he managed to pick up a pirated version on VHS of the original Berserk series, which I still love to this day. So I had that a long time before it was probably several years before I actually clapped eyes on one of the actual books. Initially I just knew it from that, and then you suddenly get the books and the artwork is just next, completely different to anything I'd seen at the time, and just next level. And that sort of obviously sort of new graphic novels and grew up with comic books and things like that. But that was like, okay, this is for grown-ups. this is Guts has just awful. I mean, he is possibly the most unlucky man you've ever met, but at the same time manages to be this good, interesting character with a lot of development. And it's that sort of combination of the sort of long, sweeping narratives with with the artwork as well, tying all that together. And as you say, these sort of very almost Lovecraftian ideas of sort
Yeah.
of gods and how they come about, and how those are sort of created more through emotion and through people's sort of beliefs than being a sort of already existent sort of being. And I think just to touch on the ones, like I grew up on a lot of, I've basically been a big 40k nerd, like Warhammer my whole life. And again, that sort of idea of the chaos gods, and that again being they're a product of human emotion. They wouldn't exist at all if it wasn't for human jealousy and anger and desire and all this. So I think that sort of idea has always resonated well with me, sort of throughout things. But yeah, I mean, Berserk's just that sort of weird idea of like, okay, things can be really weird and really dark and really awful,
Right.
but still sort of presented in this beautiful but horrible sort of art form. Um,
Because we have Griffith with it's like a the god figure in the well in the last part of the story, but it's evil, you know. But people see like the
yeah.
savior. To what extent that is related? I mean, the god figure in your album is evil or is it good?
I think it depends on whose side you're sitting on. And I think this is a sort of running theme we've sort of had throughout the albums is that with the sort of conflicts that we had in Ashera and the ones that we had in Etnamen, we've sort of always tried to sort of tell a story from both sides of the perspective.
Okay.
Because I
Like
think in general that can be a bit more interesting, if a little bit more sort of taxing than say having that sort of straight, this is good, this is evil,
mm, you are
these are
not
right, these are wrong.
you are not preaching about it.
Sorry, say again?
You are not preaching about it. Preaching.
No, exactly. As I say, it's a sort of we did sort of there's various different beliefs within the band. We don't sort of stick to one even sort of like political stance really. So I mean, it's like we always want to sort of tell a story and have sort of ideas and those sort of conflicts. But like as I say, I think it's more interesting. So go, okay, so these people are this. This might seem horrible to this set of scientists who are only believe in the sort of imperial sort of truths and things like this. But then it's sort of like a development of I guess how those can be seen. Obviously, like bad things do come about with this, as we see sort of
Right.
real life clashes of different faiths and different things. These are very rarely peaceful peaceful narratives and changes. But I guess we can't really have that throughout what is essentially a metal album. There needs to be some heavy moments in there.
So having that into consideration, uh, did or did not Griffin did something wrong?
I'd say so. I'd say so. I think Griffith, although he has sort of like he has his some reasons. He has bad things happen to him, but he could have turned at the end and not. He didn't have to take the bailout. He didn't have to. He certainly, I think, with the amount that he'd build up the Band of the Hawk. But I mean, I guess he'd always sort of said all the way through it, he's only there for himself. He believed in. So it's not like he really changed anything that he said, or from his own standpoint. But I think sort of when you first watch Berserk, you don't really believe he's going to turn on everyone, or
And
that he's sort of willing to go to that sort of length of just sacrificing the entire band of the Hawk just to sort of achieve what he wants.
and I
But I
guess
guess I don't know. Yeah, it's a
that's
tough one.
that's the thing about causality, no? Like cause and effect. Like we see a man following his dream and very straight, narrow, or like focus into that path, and then the Beherit appears, and like it takes that opportunity after suffering all that, like okay, this is finally what I was uh seeking to do or seeking to achieve. So yeah. Did you have to revisit or have you keep reading the manga publication?
Yeah. So I've still not managed to collect all of them. I've got a few omnibuses. Victor recently has actually done a better job of me than picking up them all. So I've been meaning to reread through all of them recently, but there are certainly a few of them lying around when we were sort of looking at themes and bits and pieces, and even I like sort of art inspiration and things for the album. But it's definitely one I'm sure I'll revisit a few times. It's so vast as well. It takes a good while to get through. So
I mean, the author, well, now has sadly passed away, but
mm.
it is the story is it's been around since the 80s, right? Or is earlier than
Yeah.
that? I mean,
So I think 80s potential, as I said, but potentially earlier 80s. I came into it through the sort of 90s, like animation manga. So I mean, it's yeah, I mean, it's something that's been around for like what, 30 years, 40 years nearly. But I think it started, obviously like the internet's helped massively with things like this, but I think it sort of started sort of gaining that more, not mainstream, because I don't think Berserk's ever going to be mainstream, you know what I mean? But with everything that happens in it. But I think it's certainly gained a lot more sort of popularity. Certainly since when I was young, sort of thing, which is only great to see because it's a fantastic bit of work. So it only deserves read more, you know.
I mean, I never watched or read anything about Berserk until the coronavirus. You know, I have quite some free time, and I read the manga, and I feel like, how did I not read this before? Because it's like,
Yeah,
you know, the I mean, it's just great. It's just great. I have not words to
yeah.
describe the scale of it.
I mean, no Berserk, no Dark Souls, right?
Right. Although, I mean, I have some friends that are huge fans of Dark Souls,
Yeah,
Elden Ring. I'm not particularly inclined into video games, but yeah,
yeah,
I
fair.
can see I can see the appeal, if anything. So what could you say is like a more clear inspiration into that Berserk, into the narrative of the album?
I mean, I think, as I say, I mean, it's not so much a direct inspiration on it as just the sort of themes and that sort of grown up sort of idea, I guess.
Mm.
It's just this sort of like with us all reading various bits and pieces and different bits of sci-fi and different bits of fantasy. Things will creep in. Some of the just visual sort of imagery, especially from the books
Mm.
that we'll talk about, is not from the books, but yeah, sort of some of the visual imagery and how you can sort of describe that. Oh, here's a massive weird portal opening. We'll maybe take a look at a bit of artwork from Berserk and like, okay, cool, that's an awesome visual. How do we now describe something sort of similar that maybe fits into our own universe? But it's definitely the sort of visual assets of it can really help that sort of just getting some weird and wonderful lyrics down.
Okay. Uh, is this album like a for I mean, would you say it's a continuation musically, or is like a world building type of album compared to the previous one?
So I mean, what it's kind of so narratively wise, I mean, it's sort of set in the same universe, but it sits outside of the sort of previous albums. So it's not so much a sort of continuation narrative really from them as more just a new sort of story within that universe. I think timeline, if we timeline everything, there was an EP we released called Aurora Majesty, and it
Mm.
actually kind of sits just before that. So in our own heads, there's this sort of very odd non-linear timeline of where all these things are happening
Okay.
from each album. I think musically, it certainly sort of takes a lot of precedent from Etterman. But again, I think it sort of changes things up a little bit. So you still have those sort of Etterman, as I mentioned earlier, was sort of very a lot big epic sort of grandiose sounding things, whereas with Voidkind, that's sort of still in there musically. But again, it sort of suited things more to have a few more sort of visceral, punchy tracks on there, a few shorter things, which I think sort of been a development of our own sound, as well as coming from the sort of idea of wanting to tell again a slightly different story or whatever we've done with previous albums.
And in this regard, how do you avoid repetition? I mean, there's a part of repetition because you continue your own dialogue, but how do you avoid doing the same twice musically? Is that something
Yeah,
that
yeah, sure.
you have in heavily into consideration?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just a matter of writing enough, eh? But I mean, yeah, there's always that sort of in the back of our heads if a song's coming together and going, oh, okay, that sounds maybe a bit too similar to what we've done in the last one. Some of that might be down to us. Some of that, this one, can, for example, be down to Graham, the producer we've worked with the last few albums. Like he's quite good at happy to point out, no, that sounds too similar to something you've done before. How can we look at changing that up? Whether that be from, okay, let's introduce some different style of drum beats over this riff that we've maybe not used before. So although the riff might be something similar, the drums are doing something very different, or vice versa. Maybe we've got something where the sort of rhythm and feel of a section is different, but okay, cool, we're gonna use a sort of different riff motive for that we've used before. Few other things we do that we play around with different tunings a lot as well,
Okay.
which from a guitar point of view can really open up like different ideas and ways songs come together. And also from on this album, whereas previous on Etterman, so Alan, who plays bass for us live, he's come back into the band sort of between Etterman and this album. So he's actually written a lot of the guitar for this album, which is a slightly different guitar writing lineup from Etterman. He was in the band when we did a Sharon. So I think that certainly changed up some of the writing as well, just because he's had a lot of sort of different influence on how the guitars have come together.
Mm,
So changing up your lineup that
interesting.
can certainly help things. I
Well,
wouldn't recommend it. It's not like the most ideal one to go down. Um, but yeah. There's a few different factors that sort of lead into that. As I say, you're always wanting to sort of it's finding that balance of sort of going, right, we don't want this to be too different. It still needs to sound like us, but we want to push this in a different direction or push this further. Always.
maybe this is the reason I find I strongly resonate with this record as an Asheran fan rather than the other album. I mean, well, I'm not saying that this was like intentional, but maybe in the abstract there's some element of that, um, or that some um truth to that. So sorry for my bad English.
Oh,
Um,
that's fine.
uh, I want to ask you also about the artwork. You know, each time the band surprises me with the choosing of the form, the art form of the artwork. Um, Very different, in the type of design or the type of technique that you show, like different color. So, again, what kind of importance do you or the band give to the artwork in terms of, you know, um, like being right to the album?
Yeah, no, 100%. Like the artwork's very important to us, and with every album, and this one included, was sort of gone out. There'll be again sort of discussion around, and obviously looking at examples and bits and pieces we've found of what we can do with the artwork and how it's very important to us that the artwork, especially when you're looking at the sort of vinyl release, everything like that, fits in with the music and the themes. And as you were saying with colors, we wanted to use a different palette on this one. So I think the sort of last one we've gone for a lot of golds. This one's a lot darker and reds, which sort of I think backs up the sort of musical approach of the album. But yeah, it's always a big one for us is that finding the sort of the art that suits the album and again doing something a bit different and maybe doing something a little bit different to other albums that are getting released around, and just having that sort of bit that's like you get it in your hand, you're like, yeah, that looks cool and I can see where this is, and also using it to help sort of visually tell back up a bit of the narratives that's going on. So if people are looking at some of the lyrics, they might be able, oh, that's maybe that, and this figure on this is maybe this. And again, it goes back to that sort of idea of like when I was a kid, you did like music wasn't streaming; it was a physical thing you always had, and I'd always sit on the bus and open up the booklets and read through the lyrics and look at whatever it was in there, the artwork or the photos, and that for me and a lot of the other guys, I think, has always sort of stuck with us, and always it's always something that you want, that sort of final package basically of everything tying together.
Do you remember a particular type of artwork that impact you in that age?
Oh, back when I was younger, no. I mean, yeah, I mean, I had a bit of manga kicking about at that time. I hadn't got to Berserk yet, but stuff like Akira, I was very aware
Mm.
of. Like I was Geiger. I think every metal kid of the late 90s was into Geiger at some point. Probably got Geiger tattoos somewhere. But yeah, anything dark and weird and just a bit different. The Hieronymus Bosch stuff.
Oh,
Again, always been the sort of big weird hellscapes that he did were always stuff that like you look at once and you're like, that's awesome. And then you look at again, you go, now I've noticed this and now I've noticed this. And
mm. I don't know if this is just my idea, but I think that nowadays bands pay more attention into the artwork. I mean, and I'm not saying the past was bad, but for example, this artwork, like, well, for one reason, we have like more artists at disposal. We can see more people,
yeah.
talented people. How did you reach this time to a proper artist work with?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think we'd found three or four artists through social media accounts, basically.
Okay, you have to search for it.
Or
You have to
yeah, we've
actively
had to
search.
go out. Yeah, we've actively gone out and searched for them. I mean, obviously, like, because for example, I'm off social media myself, so I
Mm.
don't see a lot of this stuff unless we go out and actively search for it. Um, but we've had some friend recommendations, potentially other artists we've worked with in the past, whether it be on albums or things like shirts that might recommend other people to us as well, just through word of mouth. And then it's usually just a matter of reaching out and then having a discussion with them as well about whether it's something they're interested in and want to work in. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about us having that working with someone who can do the piece, working with someone who's actually excited to do the piece as well. And it's something like, I'm excited for this project and to bring a few ideas of my own to the table. That's always really cool.
Before my final question, I want to take a moment to pick your brain for some music recommendations. But I will approach it like this. Do you think that it's important for a musician that is actively trying to improve and experiment with his own music to also evolve as a music listener, like reach into new types of music or offers currently?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I mean, it depends on the person. Like as I say, when I was young, I listened to nothing but metal, and I played nothing but metal, and my metal was fine, but it was metal.
Right.
It was very straight, and by expanding yourself and things you're listening to, that's only going to open up ideas
Mm.
and ways of playing that you would otherwise probably not have come across. Um, yeah, I mean, as I said, I think it's been very important for my own development and the guys in the band, obviously always keeping an ear out and always sort of finding new bits and pieces to listen to.
Nowadays, you find more like inspiration, let's say, into other music than just metal. Because I mean, lyrically and thematically, we have described Berserk, different book. I by Serion, I don't remember the name. You mentioned in the press.
Say again, sorry, I lost you there for a second.
The name of the book that you also like mentioned in the press release.
It was Hyperion,
Hyperion,
I
sorry.
think
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the
yeah.
one. Yeah. No, it's fine.
Hyperion.
I lost it. I lost my own brain there for a sec. But yeah, Hyperion was one that we'd a few of us had read. last year before he went into the studio as well. So
So, well, my question is, what music nowadays do you think like do you find like impressive in regards to the things that you like or the things that you approach with your music?
yeah, I mean, it can be anything really. For example, that's bands like sort of Tanara, which is an African band. They're very sort of North Africa sort of traditional music. We had the pleasure of sort of playing out in Las Vegas a few years back, and
Mm,
they were also playing that same festival. And just they were the standout band of the festival. They were just very, very different. And it's like I say, there's not a heavy riff in there at all. It's all traditional, but the way they approach their sort of music and the thematics of it and that sort of and even the live show, like literally is on a massive stage with barely amplifier. It's all traditional instruments. So something like that can be very influential. There was and then like for myself as well, there's quite a bit of hip hop and stuff I'll listen to. So it's like the production, especially on sort of some of the sort of weirder hip hop stuff like Billy Woods.
mm.
You've got this sort of weird, grim, dark production that wouldn't be out of place on a metal record and yet is on a hip hop record. And there's no guitars, but it's still that sort of weird darkness. And it's always very interesting to see sort of like how's that been
It
done and how is that sort of coming across.
it seems that pop or hip hop music nowadays can't get away with a lot of things, weird things in their music, but being accepted with them to the mainstream with the mainstream. But with metal or rock music, that just doesn't happen. Why do you think? Is the guitar or the vocals?
I think it's the vocals. Because I can show my parents some hip hop and they might be like, we don't like the rapping that much, but it's okay. But at least he's not screaming like we do. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
Like, I would say, like, obviously the guitars being heavy is one thing, and everyone has their own tastes. But I would say the one boundary in metal, and we love our screaming vocals, but I'd probably say it's the vocals because I think there's just something either in your brain or not that either works or it doesn't. And
Right.
whereas a guitar has a bit more of a scale on the heaviness, whereas heavy vocals is like yes or no. I'd never really meet people like, I don't really mind heavy vocals. I don't really like that. You either are or you're not in my book. So
I mean, it seems like in with metal music, like in the vocals, we kind of take it for granted. I mean, it's just screams, like, and many bands also take it for granted. Like, don't pay attention to the tone of the or the
mhm.
inflections, right? Don't pay attention to that, to the modulation and intonation for other music, or it's just also pure screaming and emotion.
No. I mean, obviously, like so with us, I mean, obviously, we sort of developed over the time of having like Victor's got a lot of clean vocals and stuff now on the album, and again, things like knowing the sort of difference between like how my screaming vocal, which is usually it's more of that sort of lower. I'm from a death metal background, sort
Right.
of influence, and whereas Victor's is a sort of higher, almost hardcorey sort of shout. So even being aware of that, um, those vocal parts end up on different parts of the album or different riffs or different parts, because they do bring a different feel to it. And also the sort of having a bit of variation in there for us on how the vocals sound and how they're doing is also like sort of super important.
Is there a recent album that you think, if I could have done something like that similar, like a metal album that metal album recently released that you feel like admiration for it?
Mm, I'd say I'm not 100% down on what's come out recently. Stuff though in the last few years, sort of what Ulver have been doing. Bands like I don't know if you're aware of Sub Rosa. They were a sort of big influence on how they work. They sort of have this sort of traditional doom sound, but
So
mixed with
so
a lot of
Rosa,
sort of
right?
weird Sub Rosa. Yeah, I'll stick it in the chat for you. They're sadly not together anymore. They've reformed under a sort of different name, which
The Otolith, there are two projects now, the Otolith and the Keening with
that's the
the.
one. Yeah. The Otolid, who are again great band. But yeah, that sort of idea of again just they were just very different. And if I'd have sat down and gone, oh yeah, I've figured out that putting two distorted violins over
So
good well written doom riffs actually just sounds fantastic. And then
so
they've had the whole like triple harmony vocals and things like this going on as well, which is great.
so you did like the Keening, the album release of the Keening.
Say again, sorry.
You did like the Keening, that other project. You like it.
The Keening I've not listened to. I've only listened to the Otolid.
Ooh. I mean,
So I'll need to check out the Keening. I wasn't aware.
so there is Sub Rosa and we have these other two projects, right? The Otolith like went into the more heavier aspect, but still remaining with
Yeah.
these classical narratives and gothic motifs. And then we have the Keening, which is like a more somber funeral type of vibe, but it's
Okay, Grant.
like camber music oriented,
Is it sort of so? See on the Sub Rosa albums, they often put a sort of traditional track in there. I think there's a couple of Irish folk songs they dropped. There's a couple of albums where they pull everything's pulled back and there's no heavy guitars, but it's still quite dark and under that sort of vibe.
So if you like the experimental approach to Sub Rosa, I will recommend you to go into the Otolith. But if you like the feeling, like the sensitivity, like you can feel it in your chest, that type of things.
Yeah.
The Keening, I mean, I was like, I don't have the proper word for it. It was touched. It was like,
Yeah.
very,
Oh well,
very.
I'll check them out for sure. Because both sides of it is very good. I'd say listen to Otolid. They're great. But as you say, that's a sort of Sub Rosa straight. Not sort of progression of what Sub Rosa were doing heavy wise. So I'm excited to hear the Keening for sure.
About the future of the band, is the band open to having a full-blown out experimental album? Like, okay, let's forget the live experience. We want to let's do something more bombastic, more epic, more weird. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's always been chat of like it would be great to do more of a sort of not movie score, but that sort of idea of an album, something that's way more based around maybe we drop the guitars and it's just synths or it's more soundscapes. And as you say, it would be done not necessarily as this is now going to get played live, but it would certainly be something that'd be interesting to record and release. I think definitely from a synth point of view, we could do something quite interesting there. Again, sort of as you say, like bands I was mentioned before, like band like Ulver, with the sort of Assassination of Julius Caesar album where they just went whoop.
I don't know if
but
you're
fantastic
familiar.
album.
I don't know if you're familiar with the band Blood Incantation. They are a death metal band, but they
No.
went into more ambience kind of music and then came back like missing this experience of the ambient music into their music, and it's great. So maybe it's like something positive for a band to just try something entirely different, like to find a new kind of vocabulary to fit into their own music, perhaps.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with that. It'd be something very, very interesting to do. And I think we've always sort of had this idea of sort of like never say never with an idea or a sort of going completely left field of where we've been before. And if it's primarily if it's something we're enjoying playing, like why not? You know what I mean?
Right.
And this sort of things as again as you progress as a musician and have all these other influences as we've been talking about, it again just opens up those sort of ideas and ways of how you can go about making your own music.
Last two questions. Would you like to go and play in Mexico? You and the band?
I would love to. We'd love to come and play Mexico. That'd be great. We've discussed a bit of how we get out to and out to South America. We've never really done South and North. We've played 2 shows in North America. Never come to South America. So Yeah, we'd love to be hosted. Come over and
Well,
play for you all.
we would love to have you here, and of course that goes for Colombia, Argentina, Chile, and the rest of South America. Um, Last question. After all we discussed, all the reference books, novels, all of that, if you, I mean, like, this is its own thing, right? But you can draw
Mhm.
comparisons, like maybe influential things that happened for the band. Um, if you could visually attach the meaning of this album to another um form of work, or piece of work that already exists, like a movie, a painting, a book, which one will it be and why?
Um, for a pre-existing book, I'd say this one probably Hyperion because of the themes in it.
Okay.
Just those sort of some of the themes that come up. Obviously there's other books and influences around that. But I'd say that was probably the most direct sort of influence on the
Mm,
narrative and sort of themes of this album for sure.
I will have to check that book. Thank you for the.
Yeah, no, check it. It's great. I'm currently halfway through the second one,
Oh,
which is fantastic as well.
you
So
know what
definitely
books?
worth checking out.
What books I'm currently interested into reading? The Three Body Problems, because of the recently released series on
I have
Netflix.
that sat on my shelf just out of shot. My friend lent the book to me 6, 7 months ago, and I've still not read it. But everyone who I know that has read it has said it's fantastic. So that's on my reading list for the next. I might take it away on tour with us or something. So
Well, maybe we can talk about the next album, and have some notes on the books as well. Share some notes on that.
yeah, that'd be great. It would be fantastic.
Well, thank you for your time, Daniel. And well, it's a great release. People will definitely enjoy it. And well, see you next time.
Fantastic. Cheers. Thanks a lot.